and we have something important to talk about. For years now, I've been a Trump supporter. I heard a bunch of lies, or I heard some things about him and kind of turned my back on him for a little bit. But then I started to watch things about Trump that was actually happening. I mean, they had him as a racist. And here he's standing before an all black college, and they're cheering for him and loving him because he's speaking to them and telling them how great they are and how much he loves their community and is doing everything he can to help those who are incarcerated over drug uh, use after Joe Biden had passed the law with his friends. Trump was trying to do everything he could to help these people out that were incarcerated for a lot more years than what they should have been. And he's talking about reviving the communities, getting people that have money come into those communities and start building infrastructure and and businesses so that people would have jobs in those areas. I'm like, this guy's not racist. This guy is only trying to do good for every community. It just goes on and on and on. He's not anywhere perfect, of course. And if you're trying to say that somehow Donald Trump, who was one way one time in his life, now has changed to a better person. He says he's accepted Christ. But all the good things that he tried to do for every community seems to be muddied by the accusations that so many people are making. And I said, if you look at Donald Trump and you look at Joseph Smith, now Joseph Smith was a prophet of God during the 18th, from 18, well, when he, his first vision is 1824, I believe. And, or 1820, wherever that be. He's 15 years old, so I think it's 1820. He was harassed. He was sought after by those who seen him as a threat. Just the same as they see Donald Trump as a threat to their establishment. Donald Trump, if he gets elected this time, he is not going to go tiptoeing through the thousands of eggs that lay upon the ground. He is going to make sure that he is going to rid the swamp of as many corrupt politicians and infiltrators within the FBI, the CIA, Homeland Security as he possibly can, because there's so much corruption in there. And they're doing everything they can on the left to see he doesn't get into office. I mean, some of the lawsuits that they're coming up with, again, they're not exactly the same lawsuits that was being levied against Joseph Smith. but they're doing everything they can to demonize him, to put him in a position that he cannot serve his people in the best way he knows how. And all he's done throughout the last 8 years is try as desperately as he can to communicate with a larger amount of people, saying we can be a great nation again. And he did such a wonderful job bringing the nation's heart and soul back to the people, saying, I am proud to be an American. Well, how do I feel today whenever I see all the things that are being done to good people, including Tim Ballard and Donald Trump? I'm just beside myself. How can this United States once was a mighty nation for justice? Now, don't get me wrong, we've done a lot of wrong. I've seen it, I've heard about it, read about it. What little reading I do, but I do know about it. Slavery and the Latter-day Saints being driven out of the United States and the Civil War. And it just the Chinese that were abused, the Irish that were brought over to build the railroads and not being given real what would you say, compensation for their work. I'm I know that things have been wrong in the United States for a lot of people for a lot of years. But when we were starting to go forward, and I'm going to just check out my messaging here just to make sure I tried to get some people to come on. And so, anyway, one of the friends, I won't say what he said because he wants to stay away from the subject, but again, what is if what is worse? To the um allow these cities to be burned down, basically, that were once great, including San Francisco, LA, New York, Chicago, all these places, all these great cities at one time had a draw to them. Detroit, but for somehow, when people are trying to build these cities up, the politicians get in there and they try to do everything they can to keep the people in a state of need and dependency on the government. Those who are dependent on the government no longer are dependent on God. And that's what the Democrats want. They want you solely dependent on them. Because why? Because that develops a voting a voting class that is always going to be dependent on them to make sure that their provisions are met. I remember my great aunt, a good woman, a conservative living woman, but she would vote for a Democrat before she would even have any reservations or even any thought about voting for a Republican. Why? Well, again, my family from my mom and dad's side, or my dad's side, came from Oklahoma during the Dust Bowl years. And they ended up in a place called Weed Patch. And this place was ran by social services basically at the time. And the people there were able to be given the provisions, the necessities of their needs. And this was the work of the Democrats to put these places in operating condition. And so they look at the Democrats, a lot of people from that era, as being their savior because they were hungry, they're poor, they were beaten down, and the only people that came to help them was the Democrats. And okay, well, if my friend Daniel is going to chime in on Facebook, and I hope he's okay with me repeating what he's writing here. Appreciate Daniel chiming in. Trump tried to overthrow the 2020 election results to and subvert the will of the people. He deserved to be impeached and permanently barred from office for his action. And so, again, if they he didn't get impeached, if I remember correctly, and I mean he did get impeached by meaning he never got the first impeachment. It went to the Senate, of course, and it never materialized as a he got impeached by the House, but the Senate did basically said we are not impeaching the president. And then you have the January 6th committee who brought forth impeachment accusations towards Trump, but again, there was no finalization of the impeachment. Just because you're brought up before a jury, that doesn't mean you're convicted. They still have to do their part, and the judge has to finally give sentence to those who have have committed a criminal act, and that never did happen to Trump. A lot of accusations, just like Joseph Smith had a lot of accusations, but they were seen as just frivolous accusations. And so let me go through a few of these, and I'll offer this again for did Trump try to overthrow the election? Well, from my point of view, watching all the different and listening to all the comments and everything like that, and then changing all the election laws, and they did this in not by legislature, but they did it through the court system. This is an illegal attempt to subvert the laws that are in place by using the court system and not using the legislature. You cannot use the courts to alter election laws. Only the legislature can create laws. It is the Justice Department that actually upholds the laws. And if there is an unconstitutional act on the law that was created, then the Justice Department can rule it as unconstitutional. All right, but never was there ever a time that the legislature ever created an election law in those states that the court came in and ruled on that on the altering of those rules. Never were those original rules ever deemed as unconstitutional. So when you have Michigan and all these other states that are implementing rules on their election, and they're doing it through the courts and not through legislation, then it is creating or basically you just created a non-binding voting uh, uh, system because it's not bound because the law is not in place by the legislature in order for those mail-in ballots to be legitimized. All right. So to say that Trump somehow tried to overthrow no, it was, again, you think about this, it was done in such a way that Trump had every right to say these states have acted outside of the law, which was created in the land of the United States through the Constitution, given each state authority for their own election. But within the states, they already created those laws, and in order for those laws to be changed, either the court system would have to come in and say your laws are unconstitutional, and that didn't happen. The court just came in and said, well, we're going to change the way that we're voting now because of the pandemic. But we've had pandemics before, back in 1915 and 20 or whatever that was. The laws weren't altered for election. They stood pat as it were. So to say that, and Trump is out there doing everything he can, say, I feel like the election's been stolen from me. I feel like the election's being stolen from me. Why wouldn't he feel that way? Why can't he feel that way? Why can a man who feels villainized by the media, the mainstream media, and by many of the left-leaning Republicans feel as oh, Daniel, of course I'll send you a link and we can hash this out. Ay, ay, ay. Let me go close my door. They'll be coming in and harassing me. Ay, 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 Daniel.
Hey Jay.
Daniel Ordner. What in the world? I thought you did. So
Yeah.
I know I did a lot of things wrong. I thought you
One
did.
second, I haven't actually.
I said I must have said a lot of things wrong in order for Daniel to come in on a Tuesday also. What a wonderful surprise for me. Thank
I'm actually I'm traveling today, so I'm in a hotel room right now, so I don't have
okay, okay,
anything going on. But yeah, I know I have a lot of opinions on this, and I think you're what you just said is completely wrong. So
okay.
I want to say something. So
Been
you're
ranted for 20 minutes, so go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, and I've only heard the last bit, so let me jump in and say a couple thoughts, and then you can direct me where I'm missing.
Right.
But so what you just said about the states changing laws during COVID is completely a valid criticism of what states like Pennsylvania were doing. I think that's absolutely legitimate. Those are absolutely reasons to sue the state and get changes before the election. That's the key. Once the election happens, and this is well established by courts for decades, you can't go after the fact, especially if you didn't sue in a timely manner, and change the election results and throw stuff out. You got to go in the state courts before the election happens and get an injunction stopping unlawful practices. The Republicans in these states failed to do so in a timely manner in many cases. And all the lawsuits that they brought, the legitimate lawsuits after the election, were dismissed one after the other. They didn't win a single lawsuit. They didn't even pass the motion to dismiss stage in a single one of their lawsuits. They brought dozens and dozens of lawsuits across the country, and every single one of them was rejected by competent judges, many of which were, some of them were even Trump appointees. So there were no valid legal claims in the courts left. Trying to overthrow the results after the fact in the courts. And that's not the issue, though. The issue is what Trump did on the bully pulpit, getting up and saying that the voting machines were changed, that there were unlawful ballot stuffing happening at nighttime, that votes were stolen, that the machines were controlled by Hugo Chavez in some way. I mean, these were bizarre conspiracy theories that were completely unhinged about Dominion voting. And then he gets up and well, first of all, there's the call to the Secretary of State of Georgia that's recorded where he says, we just need you to find a couple these number of votes more that we're missing so we can win the state. There's a pressure campaign on secretaries of state in Arizona, in Georgia, and a couple other states where they're calling them, harassing them, pressuring them to try to change the results. There's efforts on legislators to get them to certify faulty ballots of electors to vote for Trump when he didn't win those states. So this is much more than lawsuits that were, valid lawsuits against election policies. This was a campaign by Trump from before November 7th onward until January 6th to undermine these results of the election using unlawful tactics, not going to the courts and bringing claims. And then on January 7th, he gets up at this rally. He knows he knows if you look, I'm curious, did you listen to the testimony before Congress? The select committee looking into January 6th and what happened? Have you listened to the testimony there?
No.
To the hours of testimony of what happened the day of, where he in advance knew the crowd was going to go to the Capitol. He pressured Pence to support him. He the day of even was sending threatening messages to Pence. He was planning to go to the Capitol to further agitate. He knew about what was happening and refused to issue any statements stopping the riots in the Capitol. This is like from top to bottom, not about valid lawsuits about the election. This is a man who had a plan and a purpose and an intent to overthrow the election, and it's inexcusable. And he deserved to be impeached. And I'm really sad that the Republicans wouldn't have voted to convict him. I think Colorado is right to remove him from the ballot for insurrection. He has, I think, a traitor to this nation, what he did on related to January 6th. I think he deserves to be barred from office for it. So that's kind of a broad overview in any event.
All right. So Daniel pulled out a lot of things that he must have paid attention a lot more than I did. Now to this, but let me give the couple of shout outs to Tim. Says, AJ, you are exactly right. President Trump did nothing wrong. And I'm not picking on you, Daniel. I'm just describing what's on my Facebook here. Piper Landon says Trump did a lot of good, and I'd vote for him again, is what she said. But what I'm saying is, I'm not trying to use these people. I'm just want to make sure that I say, hey guys, thanks for chiming in. He's never been charged with insurrection. So if he's not been charged with insurrection, how can he be disqualified just because you have an opinion? Let's say
The
Colorado.
debate that's going to be at the Supreme Court, which I think is a good debate that they're having, is can the state independently determine insurrection? I mean, there's a couple of questions before the Supreme Court. One is, does Trump qualify as an officer of the United States? And there's debate about that. So there's a lot of interesting legal questions that the Supreme Court has to grapple with. But I think I think Colorado's decision is right, that the state does have the ability to determine that insurrection happened and remove them from their ballot. So I support Colorado in that.
But then you make Colorado the let me put it this way. I think Jackson said this. How can we allow one state to determine the outcome of an election? Let's turn it around. Let's say that each state has a legitimate reason or right to disqualify any nominee that they choose or deem as insurrectionist. So how many states do you think that would use every tactic against Biden or a Democrat that was running to say that they are an anti-American based on these legal grounds and then call it as they see it?
I think there's a definition of insurrection. It's not whatever you want. It's not anything they do. It's specific actions taken against the United States to subvert in this case, subvert the election results. It's not everything Trump has done or anything Biden has done is an insurrection. That's a specific legal term, and I think there's a lot of good analysis in the legal briefs in the case. There was hours of testimony before the Colorado courts about this, proving that an insurrection happened. So it's not like you can just make up allegations and the court's going to say, yeah, there's an insurrection. It's a legal term that requires proof. Courts can review that and should review that if there's a reason to think that the court did not adequately review the evidence. But I think that's why we have, we don't have a popular vote system in America. We have electors chosen by states through their delegate process. And the reason we have that is it's not just majority vote. It actually, the states do have a role in the process. And that's a historic role that they play. I think they should exercise that to disqualify someone from office in this context. That's the Supreme Court's kind of
I have to ask this question. If who is the authority that would say, or is it the state's right, each state's right to declare somebody an insurrectionist? Or does it have to, because he's the president or an officer or citizen of the United States first, is it the federal government that has to declare him an insurrectionist, or can it be a state by state?
That's going to be the question that Congress is, so the Supreme Court's going to have to decide. And I think it's likely they're going to come out in favor of saying it has to be a federal decision anyways. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. I don't, it's hard to read the tea leaves, but I think that is the question they have. And it's not an easy question. I'm not saying it's an easy decision. I think it's an important one. I think regardless that the evidence in the Colorado case that Trump committed insurrection is incredibly compelling, and the Colorado Supreme Court affirmed that, relying on hours and hours of voluminous testimony in that case. I think anyone who hasn't should go listen to the January 6th hearings that Congress held, where they had hours of really compelling testimony about all of this, about Trump's reaction on January 6th, about the months of pressure on secretaries of state and election officials in swing states that Trump was trying to pressure them to change declare that there was fraud when there wasn't fraud. That all of this, I think, is a really compelling case, and I would just encourage anyone to listen to the testimony that was put forward, and not just rely on what Trump says or anyone else says, but look at the evidence here. I think it's incredibly strong evidence. And I'm a conservative. I'm a Republican voting, libertarian conservative. I would love to vote for Republican candidates, but Trump, I think, has disqualified himself and disgraced himself.
Okay, can I ask you a question about that? Now we talked, and Tim Jackson is going, hey, it's pretty obvious the Supreme Court is leaning his way, and you agree with that.
I don't know. I don't know to read the tea
I
leaves.
think they are leaning his way, but we don't, but what I'm going to ask here is, we know, or at least my opinion, the January 6th committee was skewed left completely. They had nobody in there that was willing to cross-examine the witnesses, such as Jordan, Getz, or
I mean, you had
Johnson,
Liz Cheney,
or
you had
anybody.
Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger on there who were, Liz Cheney, until this was a Republican in good standing. I think she was a conservative member of Congress, in her voting record.
She hated Trump with a passion because of the way she
Not before January 6th.
her dad,
She was a supporter of his before then.
and became, no, she was never in support of Trump, because he made some comments about Kane, and he made some comments about her dad, and many other people, and she despised him. Liz Cheney has never been a supporter of Trump. When during his uh, when he was running for president up till till today, she's never been a Trump supporter. She's been actually against
She
him
said she
mightily.
voted for Trump in 2020. She supported him at the time. So I think that's just not right. I think until January 6th, she was a supporter of his, just like, kind of the average Republican. There was
Oh,
nothing
you make
outspoken
me.
about her before that. She
Well,
voted for him.
I would disagree with that. I'm going to bring her up because she spoke against her uh, voting. Uh,
She helped raise funds for his reelection. She voted against impeaching him over the Ukraine situation. She supported him after the Access Hollywood tape in 2016. She said that Hillary's actions were worse. There's no indication that she was an opponent of Trump before January 6th.
yeah,
So,
I would.
what's your, I mean, point to some evidence if you're making an
Yeah,
assertion.
that there. I'm okay. So I cannot qualify because I wasn't expecting that line of questioning. So I
Sure,
will
sure.
look it up.
And
And
it's, I mean, ultimately, it's
from
not that
my
important.
from what I've heard, and I'm not going to, and I can't qualify it. Daniel says he can qualify it. So if you could qualify it, then fine. But we're just talking. Cheney was thrown out of office because of her bias. So that's what Tim Jackson's saying. Now
No, I mean, that's all after January 6th. Before that, she voted for him, she fundraised for him, she supported him.
yeah,
There's no evidence that she was anything but a loyal Republican before
yeah, I
January
would have
6th.
to, like I said, I'd have to look it up, and I don't think that's going to happen right now.
No, I
But
agree. But I don't know any
it'd
of it.
take it'll take a lot, and I'd only find me one little line maybe.
But
But
anyways, I mean,
the
regardless,
question,
I would say, like, listen to the testimony was compelling. There was a lot of it.
but did they
I
have
agree
people
that
in there? Did they have okay? So Liz Cheney up to January 6th was for Trump, is that right?
yeah,
So after that, she was completely against him, would you say?
I'd say she
She
turned
was
against him.
completely against him, is that right?
Yes.
She turned on him, is that right? So she
Oh,
would not be,
rightfully so. I mean, he does not deserve
so
anyone's
so
loyalty
she
after what he
so
did,
so
but
she so whenever they were having these witnesses brought before the committee, then would she be so inclined as to cross-examine them to show Trump as the victim and not the villain? Because now she's against them because of January 6th.
I think that if you look at the committee and will listen to the questioning and listen to the witnesses, that it was a good hearing. There were good questions asked. I think she conducted herself very well, and the testimony speaks for itself. So I would just recommend to anyone to go listen to the testimony.
Right.
There's a
Like I
lot of
said,
evidence that's
I would trust
going.
Jim Jordan, who's still a Trump supporter, Matt Gaetz, who's still a Trump supporter, or Mike Johnson, who's a Trump supporter, and all these other people that are actually Trump supporters to be in that because they were refused to be allowed to be on the committee. Why were they just uh, not allowed to be in the committee?
I think Jim Jordan has disgraced himself and how he's responded to this, and so I think he would
Well,
have undermined the committee in every way. So I think I agree that they probably should have had someone who was somewhat, like, more, maybe more neutral towards Trump on the committee. I don't think Jim Jordan would have been a very good choice based on his
it doesn't
behavior.
matter. We could name.
Anyways, I don't think it matters because
There's
I
a
think, like, the
hundred.
testimony stands for itself. The people spoke about what, the evidence they put forward is compelling to anyone who watches it. And so, saying, oh,
But
there's
did they
bias
bring in?
doesn't take away the evidence.
Did they bring
I
in?
don't care what bias there is. I think the evidence speaks for itself ultimately.
Did they bring in the witnesses that uh would be able to uh uh talk about the fact that Pelosi was given an opportunity to have the guard to be engaged in that day on January
I know,
6th.
I don't know. I know there was some, I don't know. I know there's
But
some
you have
discussion
the
around it.
mayor who was offered the same opportunity. They're the people that are in charge of security for the House of Representatives, or for the Capitol building. So if they're in
They,
charge
they interviewed
of
a
security,
thousand
who,
witnesses as part of this.
well,
So
yeah, but again, if they're in charge of security and you got a great big rally going on with Trump going, then you make sure that you have enough security in place so
sure.
that, and you don't bring the Hells Angels like they did at Altamont.
Sure,
Up
and
to security,
I don't feel like I need to
you
defend
know?
everything that the January 6th committee did or that Nancy Pelosi did. Like I'm very happy to criticize Nancy Pelosi all day long. So you're
Yeah,
not gonna you're not
but
gonna like make me do anything I'm uncomfortable with
but do
by
you
saying that.
but do you okay, now do you agree with the Trump was sued for fraudulently uh, um, increasing the value of his property in order to
Yeah,
get a better loan rate
yeah.
from the banks. Do you think that $364 million that he's levied against him is a fair judgment?
And that is the lawsuit of all the lawsuits against Trump. There's a lot of them. That's the one I've actually like spent the least amount of time in the weeds of.
And all the
So,
witnesses that
so
were
I'm gonna say that.
were the owners of the banks or the
Yeah.
CEOs of the banks said we made all kinds of money from Trump. Why are we trying to discredit
Here's
what
what I'll
he's
say.
doing?
I'll say that it seems like based on what I've seen in this one, and I like I said, this is the one I've studied the least of all of the lawsuits. The elements of the crime were satisfied. He did commit fraud. I think it was probably not the best use of prosecutorial discretion to go after someone when the banks are not demanding revenge and not upset about what happened and everyone kind of ultimately got paid in that way. So I would say that it was like on the books, like the elements are satisfied. He committed the crime, the fraud, but it was probably not a good choice to go after him for that in particular.
But I got a question. So do you own property? I own my house, all right?
Yeah, I do too.
I know I own property, okay? Or I own this house, at least it's on mortgage. All right. Now, one of the things that we do is when we go to a bank, we need a loan. All right. We set the value of the home, say this is what we
Yeah,
will,
you go on the high end of
and then
the high
yeah,
range.
and then you go and let's say my home's worth
Sure.
400,000. All right. And I say, well, the home's worth 450,000, which is a 10% over the amount of actually what the home
Right.
is really worth. Is that right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
so, so,
reasonable.
so 10%, all right? So then the bank comes back, says, here's the appraiser. They say it's only worth $400,000.
Yeah.
So I accept the fact that it's only worth $400,000. Then they still give me the loan based on a $400,000 property. Now, when Trump deals with $100 million of a loan, and let's say he's got a property that's worth uh uh $120 million, and he declares it to be $200 million. All right. The increase, let's say that, so that's a what 60% over the top of an increase of what the value of actual value is. And then the bank comes back and says, no, your value of your home or your property is only worth $120 million. That's what we're going to base the loan on. They still go and they still do the same process there as they do anywhere. It's not like that Trump is just getting loans without the bank actually coming in and saying, this is what your value, the real value that that our assessors are stating. So how is Trump committing fraud when it's the bank's part to actually exercise on their,
No, it is
you
a
know what I mean?
mutual, it
They
is a
have to
mutual
send out their
guarantee.
assessors in order for them to declare their actual, what they feel the market is, value of that property is.
Well, when you're dealing with hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, these vast empires, they don't have the bank doesn't have always the means to assess the exact amount. His say so about it matters quite a lot in this context.
If his
Um,
say so matters, then he's not committing fraud if the banks trust him.
no, that's not true.
Fine.
What? So because someone believes you and doesn't call you out on it, you can lie about your assets. That doesn't make sense as a principle. Like, let's move away from Trump and just like ask,
Well,
does this
I'm just saying that if you've
if
got such,
you
if
if
you've
you
got a reputation, I'm going to ask this question again. If you've got a reputation that the banks are trusting your word and your appraisal of your property, then it's upon them to
no, you're still committed fraud. I mean, you still lied. I mean, putting aside whether it's should have been a civil action brought against him by the state, like he still lied. There's still evidence that he lied, and dramatically so over years. So I don't see the issue that you're seeing there.
so is it okay? So Mar-a-Lago,
Yeah.
this is from Tim Jackson. Mar-a-Lago is worth upwards to $1 billion. The judge only assessed it at
Yeah.
$18 million. Is that acceptable?
I like I said, I haven't followed the
Yeah,
specific.
so that one, okay. So
I'm
let's go
I'm gonna
to,
pass on this one.
yeah,
I
so
have
let's go to the next one
nothing to say
where
on this
he's
one.
accused of slander by a woman that claimed that he raped her. And then she's awarded $84 million for slander.
Yeah.
I mean, $84 million for Trump defending himself, saying I never knew
Let's
the woman.
AJ. I think what I would say is there's two issues in most of these cases. One is, did he do the thing that he's accused of? Is he liable for it? And the second is the amount of the penalty. Is the penalty reasonable? And I think there's going to be a lawsuit, like an appeal on the amount of the penalty. There should be an appeal on that because the jury verdicts can be excessive in these kind
But
of
he's
cases.
got to come up with $100
Yeah,
million for the one
yes,
and
that's
four
what
hundred
happened.
fifty million dollars for the other,
Sure.
just until the appeal process.
Sure, and I would say that it should be easier to, in those contexts, get an appeal. If you can prove that it's impossible to pay, it'll be burdensome in such a way. So that's aside. But the question here is, was he actually liable for the slander, for the defamation in this context? And I think the evidence was clear that he was.
And
Whether the verdict, this is again, like I don't, I would say a jury looked at the evidence. There was competent evidence of it, and they found in Carol's favor. I think based on the facts, there's nothing
and
wrong. The amount may be excessive. That doesn't change the reasoning of the
so
jury.
so a person that is accused of a crime cannot deny the accusation,
Of course, he can.
and he'll get sued for it because that's what happened to Trump. He said, I never knew the woman, I don't know anything about it. And so therefore, this accusation of me raping her is,
Well, no, I mean, calling it a fraudulent and a fraudulent story to sell a memoir. I mean, like the specific things he accused her of are what they took to the jury, and the jury found that it was false and it was defamatory. This is not like any defense of himself. Of course, he can defend himself. He should be able to defend himself. No one's doubting that he should defend himself.
yeah,
It's
and
not.
I think he
It's
has every
specifically,
right
did he did he
speak out.
satisfy the elements of libel in this context?
So he's not allowed to speak publicly about
Of course, he
a
is.
person
Absolutely.
without being sued for slander.
Yeah, of course, and he should be allowed to, and I mean, there should be a robust protection for speech. Libel law should be protective of the First Amendment, and I think it largely is because of the New York Times v. Sullivan and other decisions that the Supreme Court has issued. It's very protective, ultimately, of free speech rights, as it should be. America is, I think, very, very protective of speech, and it needs to be. And I'm a First Amendment lawyer. I fight for that every day, to defend that. So I'm 100% think that we need robust protection for free speech, robust ability to defend yourself. And if there's, First Amendment issues, they should be raised and litigated in this context 100%.
So again, E. Jean Carroll is the woman that claimed claimed, and then she also then sued him for defamation of character.
Yeah.
And again, the court never found Trump uh, um, never found Trump guilty of rape, but but eventually another court comes up and they charge him for defamation of character. And when he was speaking loudly about the fact that this woman is accusing me of something that is horrendous and I never even knew her, and somehow he gets to sit in court and listen to
I
people.
think AJ, the problem with what you're everything I've heard you say so far in this conversation is you're not
Yeah,
looking at the evidence. You're not actually sitting down and looking what was presented to the jury. And I have admittedly have not done this in detail in this
right.
defamation.
But
So
there
I can't
was
claim expertise. I have spent a lot of time on the January 6th stuff, and that's where I can really point to the details and the
right.
specifics before the committee, which you
So
can't do. Here, like I don't know. I mean, I think there should, I would absolutely defend Trump's right to appeal if there was a miscarriage of justice, if the elements were not satisfied, if the amount was excessive, which seems very possible. I think it's absolutely his right to do so, and I would support his right to fight for his right to speak out. But the elements of defamation were before the jury, and the evidence, my understanding is that there was a lot of evidence that was compelling to the jury based on what I've read in this case. And like I haven't studied it
right,
exhaustively
right.
as I have with January 6th.
But what I'm
But I would say
saying
like
is
you got to look to the evidence. You got to see was there enough evidence to satisfy the elements. That's what legal case is. It's
that's the but
specific claims and specific elements and evidence presented by competent lawyers on both sides. And I trust the legal process that the appeal should happen. They should fight for it. I'm not saying that you lay down and don't fight it or contest it, but if the elements were satisfied, I don't have a problem with that.
right, because in the fraud case, there was no jury. This was the judge had already made a ruling on behalf
No, so, well,
of
so there's two pieces of a trial in the civil so there's a determination of liability which was before the jury, and then there's a damages assessment that happens after the fact.
no, there
So
was no jury. There was no jury assigned to the case at all. The judge made a ruling without based on the accusations that were made by the New York district attorney. Um, let's see.
that's not
Letitia James is investigating Trump's company for allegedly.
wait. How do
So
we jump from Carol to James again?
yeah,
I
but I'm
don't
just saying the first one that we were talking about,
exactly.
there was no jury at all.
Let's move
Judge
that.
made a
Okay,
ruling
let's jump
that
from one to
he
one. So
created fraud.
the Jean Carroll
They had a
lawsuit
jury, but
jury.
but the okay, so you have a jury, but if you have it in a district which
There's
is
two juries. There was an initial jury.
right,
There was a second jury, right? A separate jury impaneled. If I could be wrong about this. I
right.
haven't followed that as
But I'm
closely.
just saying, and so the is a jury can a jury be stacked?
Hey, Derby, what?
Can a jury be stacked against
Against
the
someone?
yeah?
I mean, that's why you have a lawyer. Yeah, of course, but you have lawyers on both
I
sides
mean,
fighting over it. Using
you only
their
have you
preliminary
only
challenges, etc.
yeah you only as a lawyer, and I think you are a lawyer. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, of
Okay.
course.
As a lawyer, you go into a trial and you are you defending or
I do litigation on behalf of plaintiffs against the government.
plaintiffs?
We do a lot
Okay,
of
so
trials.
you're only given so many dismissals. Is that correct? From the
You have a certain number of challenges.
challenges. There you go.
every state would be different, and the federal court systems,
Right,
every system would be a little different on this. But I mean, you have a couple things you do. First of all, you screen juries for bias, and if there's cause, you can dismiss them for cause. So if there's someone who's, let's say, voices their animosity to Trump, you
right,
can exclude them. That doesn't require one of the challenges. The challenges are usually not for cause. There's a certain number of challenges not for, or of removals not for cause, and you can challenge anyone for cause. So,
right, right.
and I assume that Trump's attorneys did a competent job in challenging and fighting for the composition of the jury,
Yeah,
as I
but
would
if you,
expect from high
but
quality.
if you only have a certain, and I'm surprised, and I'm definitely surprised that Trump's attorney, well, I think in that case, and I think in that case, Trump's attorney already decided that this thing was going to have to be appealed because there was never going to be a jury pool in the district that he was being charged in that would allow for fair judgment against
I don't think that's
or
true. I mean,
for
admittedly, it's challenging, obviously, in a, let's say, in a liberal state, a district, to find a pool. But I think you can find 12 people that are going to be looking at the evidence impartially and make a decision. I don't see any reason to think they didn't do so here any more than any average any jury pool would be. It wasn't. So I don't see evidence for that. I think the Trump.
you've never watched enough cowboy movies like I have.
But
Oh,
anyways, well, AJ, I didn't. Like I said, I don't want to jump on and spend a lot of time on here.
right.
I wanted to talk specifically about January 6th, because that's where I've spent
Yeah, yeah,
the
that's
time and the
fine.
effort to have
No,
really strong views on. I appreciate you letting me voice my disagreement on this one.
absolutely. I
I will
appreciate.
not connect it to, you wanted to talk about Joseph Smith, and I don't want to do that. So I will leave it at that, at
Absolutely.
this point.
Man, Daniel, I really appreciate you coming on. It was really a lot of fun going
Yeah,
through these
appreciate it.
things and very beneficial for a
I
lot of
appreciate
people.
it. Thanks, AJ.
You have a great night.
You too.
So Daniel came on. Anybody else that wants to show up, just try go ahead and uh, come on in. I sent a link to many people already, but I was so again. Here we have Donald Trump being indicted, being accused, and being uh, uh, sued by several entities out there trying to deface him, trying to tear him down. And in my opinion, all these things, all these charges against Trump have been designed to create uh, an avenue for to keep Biden in office, and then I appreciate that, Tim. He says he's getting ready for a trip to Richmond tomorrow. But anyway, so why would they do these things to Trump? Because of his boldness to go after the corruption. And when you go after those who are uh, solely income is solely dependent on how much corruption lies within the government. I mean, you think about John F. Kennedy, a beloved president, and Robert Kennedy. Both these men shot dead. Now, some say that John F. Kennedy was maneuvered into the presidency based on the help of the mob because his daddy done ran moonshine, and moonshine was associated with the underworld. And so they had connections. And then John F. Kennedy made a lot of people mad. Now, Lee Harvey Oswald could have been the lone gunman and was shooting at him, and then it caused a lot of chaos. And there's a video out there that the people were talking about how there was a Secret Service standing up in the car behind John F. Kennedy, and he had his gun in a prone position so that because he's hearing the fire, and when the vehicle took off, it made the gun, and he pulled the trigger based on the momentum, and then that's the bullet that took John F. Kennedy out. But the thing was, there were shots fired, and Lee Harvey Oswald could have been that one person that was firing, and that caused a cascading or the events that eventually ended John F. Kennedy's life. But again, people were mad at John because the Bay of Pigs, his stance on the Vietnam War, where he was trying to get us out of that war. So people were not happy with his decisions. I don't know what that means, but I know that after a while, when you make a lot of noise, it's like Malcolm X, another man. That became Islam, part of the Nation of Islam, seeing the corruption within, decided to get out, and his own people murdered him. When you disrupt the powers that be, you are going to make people panic. You're going to make people so panicked that they're willing to do anything to shut you down. Robert Kennedy, again, he's going after the mob. Because of that, the mob came after him because they knew that he was a man of his word. Again, so with Trump, he's going after the mob within the government. And they know that he's going to come after them. And the only way that they're going to be able to create space between them, who is part of the mob, and Trump, is to do everything they can to tear him down before the election. But the problem is, people are starting to actually see the fact that this is what's happening to Trump. All right, they're losing a lot more of the Hispanic vote. They're losing a lot more of the black vote. And I'll tell you right now, those who depend on a weekly check all the time, they're losing a lot of them because the price of gas. You're right, Tim. It's not going to work. The price of gas has driven all the other prices up. Our dollar is down because we're not exporting the goods that can increase an influx or an increase of our capital within the United States. That's how you make money. Is the more goods that you produce and you can send outside of your country, the more capital that you gain within the country. And that makes you more powerful. And oil is the one thing that we can sell and sell and just sell, because it's almost categorized as a luxury. See, we make more food almost in California than we feed enough people in out of California that it feeds half the world, I think. And I think that might be a stretch, but it feeds a lot of people. The United States feeds the whole world at times. But we're not willing to sell the food at a higher market price because we know that is a necessity for people's survival. And we refuse to increase that price going outside of the United States because we care about people that much. Because if we wanted to, we could make $1 or $2 off of our food. But then you have all these churches, and including the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they provide a lot of aid for free to third world countries, giving them food and clothing and other things, that if we sold this to other countries, instead of just giving it to them, we wouldn't have no debt. We would be in a surplus 100 times over. But again, we choose to feed the world because of our blessed lives. All right. Now we can't feed, and I think it's wrong to say that there's people going hungry in the United States. They don't have to go hungry. There's plenty of shelters and missions and places out there that provide aid for so many people. And if you have need, there's always people going and trying to help you find shelter or find food. Got a story, a personal story that I heard from a guy. Well, not a personal story. Let's do it this way. The man was personally involved in the Bay Area and the homeless situation. And he knew a father and a mother who actually rented an apartment for their homeless son and said, "We will not monitor your life. We just want you to have a place to stay." The child refused to go into that apartment because it it was he was claustrophobic, basically. He just didn't want that world. He wanted to be on the streets. And there's many more stories like that. People are afraid of being sheltered in. They feel better about being out without responsibility. So anyway, so again, like I was supposed to be making a comparison between Joseph Smith and Donald Trump. And again, some of the charges that were made against Joseph Smith, let me get to it. This, it starts here. In 1826, disorderly person treasure digging scam. All right. People have been looking for gold all the time. Let's look it up real quick. Let me get to it because I think that's Joseph Smith money digger. Treasure seeking. Let's see what we can find here real quick. Real quick. Why are you doing this? So he gets hired by a man that, okay, according to what we know, Joseph Smith was gifted. All right. The gifts of the Spirit. Some men have this, some women have this gift. I have the gift of receiving revelation and prophecy. My great grandmother had the gift of prophecy. I've told those stories. That's what we believe we have. Okay. That's fine. Now, is it possible that Joseph Smith could actually use an object to find things in the ground? That's what he claimed. But the story goes that in the 1820s, a fascination with purported Spanish treasure deposits led prospectors like Josiah Stowell to enlist the aid of seers like Joseph in their search for treasure. Stowell trusted Joseph, sought his assistance in seeking treasure, and even took his advice to finally give up the hunt. Joseph Smith Sr. considered his son's ability sacred and hoped he would cease using it to look for earthly treasures. As Joseph prepared to translate the Book of Mormon, he was commanded to have nothing further to do with those who sought treasure and instead use his gift to translate and seek revelation. All right. So again, Joseph's family is in farming. They're struggling. They never can get ahead in the business. So Joseph just working, trying to help the family out, and Josiah Stowell employs him to go look for Spanish treasure. All right, so Joseph Smith figures, well, if God wants me to do a work, you can imagine, if God wants me to do this work, he's going to have to open up the treasure box so I can make sure so that this work can go forward. Well, that's not what happened. God doesn't work the way that we want him to work sometimes. So Joseph thought that he could use this power that he felt that he had to go help Josiah Stoll find treasure, and in turn, Josiah Stoll would enrich him so that the work of the Lord could go forward in a more uh, efficient way. All right. So through it, though it was not uncommon in Joseph Smith's time to and place to encounter people who claimed to use stones to search for lost or hidden objects, using a seer stone to translate an ancient record was unheard of. God gave Joseph Smith power. Okay, so now let's see if we have any more on the story. That was one. Joseph Smith charged as a money digger. And it wasn't Josiah Stoll that brought charges against him. It was his son who brought charges. And Josiah Stoll actually was the one who was a defendant of Joseph Smith in the trial. But see if we can. You know, sometimes you look for stuff and it just doesn't come as you hoped it would. And so you scramble. Trial of Joseph Smith and I'm trying to. Okay, so here it is, the trial. This is the 1826 trial against Joseph Smith. In March of the next year, Stoll's son or nephew, depending on which account you follow, brought charges against Joseph, and he was taken before Justice Neely. The supposed trial record came from Miss Pearsall. The record of the examination was torn from Neely's docket book by his niece, Emily Pearsall, and taken to Utah when she went to serve as a missionary under Episcopalian Bishop Daniel S. Tuttle. This will be identified as, let me do something here. Let's bring it over here so I can kind of read a little bit better. This will be identified as the Pearsall account, although Neely possessed it after her death. It is interesting that the first published version of this record didn't appear until Miss Pearsall had died. William D. Purple took notes at the trial and tells us in February 1826, the son of Mr. Stoll were greatly incensed against Smith, saw that the youthful seer had unlimited control over the illusion of their sire. They caused the arrest of Smith as a vagrant without visible means of livelihood. Whereas the Pearsall account says warrant issued upon oath of Peter G. Brigman, Josiah Stoll's nephew, who informed that one Joseph Smith of Bainbridge was a disorderly person and an impostor brought before court in March 20th, 1826. So we have, and then they're just talking about the different accounts. Let's see. Get down here to some meat. Let's try here. You knew its immense value as a weapon against Joseph Smith if its authenticity could be established. And the only way to establish authenticity was to get hold of the record book from which the pages had been reportedly torn. After all, you had only Miss Pearsall's word for it, and that the book ever existed. Why didn't you immediately send her back to find the book or make every effort to get hold of it? I think that's, and I'm not getting to la la la. Well, anyway, so basically, the way this runs out is Josiah Stoll hires Joseph Smith. He sought after Joseph Smith. It wasn't Joseph Smith seeking after Josiah Stoll. All right. Josiah Stoll seeking after him. For one, Joseph Smith is a strong boy. And if you're going to have somebody dig a hole, you might as well get somebody that potentially could lead you to the treasure. But after they lead you, would be so excited about digging the hole that you'd get it, no matter how deep it was, you were going to get to it. So again, why would they attack Joseph Smith? What? Because again, the story goes that Joseph had seen the Father and the Son. He proclaimed himself at times to be the coming prophet eventually. So I think what happens here is either the son or the nephew didn't like Joseph Smith personally. Because right now, Joseph Smith is not making a lot of noise, but people are starting to be irritated by his position in the community, by the things that the stories that surround him. So, and for Josiah Stoll, it was for one reason that he had association with them, whereas the nephew or the son seemed to think that their father was duped into thinking that Joseph Smith was some kind of prophet or seer and had special powers. And they felt that if the story was true, maybe, about the father and the son coming to him, then that could somehow create division between the father and the son, or the nephew, I think the son mostly, because Josiah trusting Joseph Smith, and Joseph Smith is credible about the story, then Josiah would have probably fell right in line with the church eventually, which comes up. We don't know why, but I'm just saying those are some kind of ideas. And I understand that this is a small thing compared to Trump being accused of an insurrection, being accused of fraud, but it gets better. I mean, it definitely, and he again, he's accused of being a disorderly person. In June of 1830, Constable Ebenezer Hatch arrested Smith on June 30th, 1830, held him overnight, and brought him before Justice Joseph P. Chamberlain on a charge of being a disorderly person. What does it mean to be a disorderly person? Joseph Smith is making the claim that he's writing a book, or he's written a book of scripture. And some people are offended by that. Smith was transported to South Bainbridge, New York. His 2-day trial took place in late June, ending on July 1st, 1830. And he was defended by 2 attorneys hired by Joseph Knight. Smith was acquitted. Immediately after his release, however, he was arrested again and transported back to Colesville for a second trial. He was acquitted again. So Joseph Knight joins the church, member of the church, and he's having to pay Joseph's legal fees and hire lawyers for him. This ship is not getting out of the dock area very well. Man, it's sinking fast. If the person that you're calling a prophet, or calling a prophet, is already being accused, and you're having to pay out money for lawyers, man, this is looking pretty bad. All right, the ship is not going to sail very, very well. And then, but disorderly person, Joe Smith is out there preaching what he says is the truth, just like every other pastor or preacher that's a part of that time. But yet they're pointing at Joseph Smith and saying, you're a disorderly person, because he's disrupting the powers that be. Just like Trump is disrupting the powers that be, so is Joseph Smith. So is Jesus Christ. And I don't put those three in the same category, or in this, and say Joseph Smith is much like Jesus Christ and Trump is much like Joseph Smith. I'm saying there's parallels with those who have made great noise amongst all the corruption and darkness that looms about in their era. And what happens to them? They keep on being accused of every treacherous thing that is possible to keep them from gaining any power at all. I mean, how many times was Jesus Christ called Beelzebub, or the devil, in the Bible? And we don't have but 140 pages written about him. And he was on his mission for 2 or 3 years, whatever that looks like. 140 pages is nothing in a man's lifetime, or in a year and a half or 2 year lifetime. So then, in 1831 and through 1838 in Ohio, Smith faced numerous charges, including charges of assault, illegal banking, and banking fraud. In 1838, he fled Ohio to Missouri. Yeah, think so? Okay, as far as the banking fraud, there's depictions of, I don't have his name off the top of my, off on the tip of my tongue, but Parrish. Anyway, one of the leading men in the banking institute that they had created was taking the funds and using it for whatever his needs was. And then it wiped them out. And then Joe Smith gets, because he's the leader of this band of savings and loans place, or what is it called? Anyway, not a Kirtland Safety Society, because he's in charge of it. He's the one who gets accused of bank fraud, not Parrish, who was the one who's actually dipping in the till. All right. And then assault. If Joseph Smith assaulted you, you'd be broken. 1835. In April of 1835, Smith was charged with assaulting his brother-in-law, Calvin, husband of Smith's sister, Sophronia. Smith was acquitted. Oh, man. In February 1837, Samuel D. Rounds swore a writ against Smith and Sidney Rigdon for illegal banking and issuing unauthorized bank paper at a hearing on March 24th. The court found sufficient evidence for the case to go to trial in October. Smith and Rigdon were tried in absentia after having left Ohio for Upper Canada. They were each found guilty and each fined $1,000. All right. $1,000 back then is a lot of money. He was arrested 7 times in 4 months, and his followers managed heroically to raise $38,428 required for bail. Wow. Piper Landon, let's see here. Yeah. Bruce Wallace telling Piper Landon, I love his policy, but not so much his tweets. But certainly had a backbone that this nation is in desperate need of. Thank you, Bruce. That is absolutely right in line. Some people just can't take a punch, and they get all weak-kneed, and they strike back by, help! Stop it! I'm hurting. You know? But Trump can be a little bit more than rude to people when people are attacking him. He has no other recourse but to attack back. When you're being attacked, hey, I had an occasion where I was talking to my Mexican friends. My one's been my friend since grammar school. He's my dentist now. I was over there doing his electrical, rewiring his kitchen and everything. and doing all that work over there. And I had a chance to talk to his wife and all that, and and they are absolutely in love with Trump. I'm surprised they don't have Trump towers at their dentist office. Because that's how much they love Trump. They think he's the greatest thing since white sliced bread. And it's sliced bread, not white bread, okay? Don't get me wrong. But it was one of the things we had that conversation. Trump is willing to get in the pigsty with the pigs and go at it, pig on pig, and he won't pull any punches. And both of them come out and they look real mess, a mess. But after everything's said and done, Trump always smells like roses when he comes out of that pigsty, because what he's saying is right in a lot of ways. But anyway, so again, 7:26, doing pretty good here. I really appreciate Daniel chiming in. That was really nice of him. I got people, 3 or 4 people actually watching, and that's much appreciated. It's comforting to know I got an audience of 3, and people that want to come and be entertained by me. But anyway, but what I'm saying, eventually, what happens to Joseph Smith, and I'm afraid of this for even and I'm afraid for this for Trump. Again, you think about all the assassinations that have happened. The Raymond Burr, Alexander Hamilton thing, that was just a duel. They both volunteered to have a duel, and somebody died. All right, and it wasn't Raymond Burr. But you have the more famous ones that I know, okay? Lincoln, shot by a Democrat. John F. Kennedy, shot by a Marxist. All right, Robert Kennedy. I'm not sure what the political leanings he had, but Martin Luther King Jr., shot by a Democrat, I'm sure, because he was looking for the system that was in place at the time, Jim Crow law, segregation. He was looking for a way to bring people together, and the haters were on the left, the Democrats. And I'm not even going to try to look it up. I'm just going to pretend like I know, and somebody can correct me if they need to. But I'm sure the guy that shot him, murdered him, was a Democrat. All right. Robert Kennedy. Not sure about that one. I don't think it was a Republican. Republicans don't play dirty. We do things. We're not the best. Well, we don't go out and assassinate people. All right. We're not like that. Not at all. So, and the first presidential nominee or running for office to get assassinated in the United States was Joseph Smith Jr. Right? He's running for president. He's running in for president, and he lives in Illinois. All right. So in Missouri, when they had the printing press there, and they were burned out, and the printing press was destroyed, the government claimed that the Mormons, as they called them, were inciting a riot with the documents that they were writing or printing, and therefore they were justified to tear down the place and the printing press. So in Nauvoo, Joseph was the mayor, and he felt that the Nauvoo expositor was inciting a riot against the members of the church, against the people of Nauvoo, and he felt justified to go in there and break apart the printing press. But then he's charged for treason. Okay. I want to, but I can come back because I think Bruce Wallace doing this one. Y'all know is rather than have Jimmy Carter than Biden. You got to learn how to write better, Bruce. I love Bruce. Not he has a lot to say. I love how he articulates. Not sure why he's still even there as he shuts down our oil to push his new Green Deal. That's not really green as he sells the border wall. He paid for 4 pennies on the dollar while he gets to pay $500,000 for his security fence around his beach house. Okay. I want to remind you guys of something, and Bruce brought it up, and I want to make sure we get this straight. Biden, lost my train of thought. No, the Green New Deal has nothing to do with why Biden shut down the oil. For one, it appeases his base. He's not looking for a new Green Deal. He's just doing whatever it takes to get a vote or two extra. Another thing, the left wants to destroy the United States. And because he needs those votes, he's willing to sell America out. Because we're still importing oil from other countries. He's allowing oil to be brought in from overseas. So if he's totally going into this new Green Deal, he's not really in if he doesn't stop the importing of oil and gas. It's just a ruse. It's just a way to destroy the economy because it's the best way to grow the economy is to sell our natural resources because it's so easy to pull it out of the ground and ship it. And we make lots of money that way. But the left wants to destroy the economy of the United States. They want to destroy the American dream. They want to destroy the United States and its Constitution because they seek after power only. That's it. They don't seek after the well-being of humanity. They seek after the power for themselves and the luxuries that come with those powers. They only see the USSR, Venezuela, and places like that. They only see the rich and their prosperity and the way that they get to throw their weight around and to call for whatever act that they deem necessary to continue with their power and have no problem, like in Beijing, where the people were protesting and they were mowed down by the tanks. And nobody really went and said, China, you're done. We're gonna come, we're gonna lay out a few of those tanks and make them obsolete, if you know what I mean. Harper Landon said Biden does what he's told. His own people exploit him. He is an elderly man who has some cognitive disabilities. Absolutely. But I totally agree with that. But again, what we have here is his wife is cognitive. She knows what she's doing. She knows that she's tearing down the country. Kamala Harris has no clue on anything. So anyway, to go back to the Joseph Smith and what eventually happens to him. So he's running for president. All right, and his platform in a movie about Greenflake, who's a African or a black slave within the Latter-day Saint community. There's a portrayal in there of my relative Elijah Abel, and there's this discussion about what Joseph Smith should say about them embracing the black community and being an abolitionist. He he writes it one way, or he has his scribe write it one way, and then Elijah Abel says, "You are going to get us killed. You're going to get us all killed. You can't do that." So Elijah Abel, it's in the movie, it's portrayed that Elijah Abel actually comes out and says, "This is what we need to say." All right, wasn't there, but that's the way the history is portrayed. And I'm not going to bring up the what was actually said. And it has some words in there that doesn't align Joseph Smith as being an abolitionist. But again, he was baptizing people of all races and backgrounds, and he loved them all. Uh, I love the movie Emma and Jane, or Jane and Emma. Jane Manning, who joined the church, and she was working with working in the house of Joseph Smith and Emma, which was a border house too. And people were saying things rudely about the black race. And he came down and he basically scolded them bad and and were ashamed of them for the things. So just in the portrayals, those portrayals come from uh, journals from these people that interacted with them. So they're saying that Joseph Smith loved the community, the black community, as much as he loved any community. And so he was an abolitionist at first, and then he toned it down because things were getting hot. So eventually he gets he Nauvoo Expositor, they're saying some fallacious things and trying to incite a riot in his mind. And so he goes and he destroys the printing press. And so they charge him with treason. And then you have that situation in Missouri where Governor Boggs is trying to get him extradited, and he's like, Mormons are an enemy to the state, and therefore they can be shot if necessary to rid the state of our enemy. Serious stuff. The reason that law became useful in 1974 or 76, whatever that was, because a person who murdered what would you call a Mormon, was able to be acquitted for that crime because that law was still in place. And then finally they removed that law. All right. So it was legal to murder a Mormon in the state of Missouri all the way up to 1981 or something like that. Pretty bad. All right. Pretty bad. But again, Joseph's dealing with a lot of things. Joseph and his friends actually go across the river after knowing that the the authorities are after them, and he's trying to. Thank you. Again, Piper Landon, a few things that she's saying is, his wife exploits him too, and she's talking about Biden. Kamala, I think she's trying to say Kamala there, is another reason we are in this predicament. Kamala Harris, oh, she's a work of art. What happened to Joseph Smith and the Mormons was simply pure hatred. Absolutely. Sorry for the typos. My dumb thumb. This is from Bruce. My thumb on the smartphone, and them small letters kind of go south sometimes. We'll work on proofreading. The biggest thing in looking at and mentioned, oh, better go back up there and read Zechariah. I really appreciate Bruce. He's just a great human being. He adds so much to our conversation. It says, and this is Zechariah 14, verse 2 through 3 and 12. That's what he wants me to read. So now I got to bring up the gospel library. Like kind of keeping noise going, because if I don't, then you got dead air time, and dead air time, that's for rookies. Well, anyway, if you want, call me what you want. I think I do a pretty good job talking about things over a 2-hour period of time, giving information. My friends like it. So anyway, Zechariah 2 through 3, it says, "For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the house rifled, and the women ravished, and half of the city shall go forth into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations, as when he fought in the day of the battle." And it says number 12, I believe, was what he mentioned here. Yep, and number 12 says, "And this shall be the plague wherewith the Lord will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongue shall consume away in their mouth." Yeah, pretty nasty stuff there. Thank you, Bruce, for bringing that up. Yeah, and again, he lacks really the support of Israel. Biden does. So not a good thing. Again, he's a disaster um, for a president by far. And, it makes a difference who you have in the presidency in a lot of ways. So, and proofreading, the biggest thing I'm looking at, as mentioned in Zechariah 14:2-3, and Trump declared announcement on December 6th, 2017, firmly recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Yeah, I remember that. Stated that the American embassy would be moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. As the left with Obama and many letters, including Biden's poor response on the conflict, is bit troubling within the Democratic Party. I totally agree. It's a waste of good paper for them people to even to write anything on. Be better wasted in the toilet than it would be for them to write anything. But anyway, so some people claim that Joseph Smith was murdered because of polygamy. Well, polygamy wasn't that big of a deal, especially when there was plenty of that undocumented polygamy and polyandry going around at the time. Undocumented meaning people having committing adultery and things like that at the time, and not being right with themselves in that way with God when it comes to concerning to the commandments that God has put forth. But anyway, so what happened in Nauvoo was, so Joseph Smith was accused of treason. Him and his friends go across the river, and the mobs are starting to form, and they're starting to make the people panic in Illinois or in Nauvoo. And so Emma finally goes and she pleads for the people that Joseph would come back. And then they're guaranteed by Governor Ford that they would be protected. All right. There's a lot of haters out there, Governor Ford. And yet you only have 2 guards at Carthage jail to protect these men so they can go to trial. Excuse me. It's like Nancy Pelosi, know that there's a big rally going on a block or two away from the Capitol. People are mighty upset because they feel that there's been fraud within the election. I still feel there was fraud in the election. There's no way that Joe I don't know where I'm at, Biden could have garnered 80 million votes without somebody rigging the game. Impossible. He got more votes than Obama did. Impossible. He got more votes than Carter. He got more votes than Clinton. He got more votes than any other president in the history of the United States. And I know there's a lot more people in the United States now than there was during Carter's time or Reagan's time or Clinton's time, but not a lot more than there was during Obama's time. The most beloved president, they would call him, because he was the first black president of the United States. Was he a token, or was he actually a legitimate president? President elected for his qualities as human being and not for the color of his skin. It's a question you guys got to ask yourself. I didn't think it was good quality. There's a lot of good quality people out there that happen to be black. And I'd vote for them yesterday and today and tomorrow if they were running for president against any Democrat. And within the Herman Cain, I loved Herman Cain. I loved his philosophy. He had a past. It didn't look like it was a good past, but he had a past. And somehow his past got the best of him. He wasn't willing to take that on the road with him and try to battle both trying to become a nominee for the president of the United States. I would have voted for him in a heartbeat, but it didn't happen. There are good men out there of all races. So the reason I wouldn't vote for Obama, because he was one who stood along with those who want to destroy the United States. And I will not stand for that. Has nothing to do with the color of the skin. And most Republicans don't look at the color of skin. They only look at one thing. What's your character like? There might be a fringe group out there, but it's so few that we don't even know they exist. But anyway, so Joe Smith was promised that he would be protected by Governor Ford. Governor Ford's got a couple of guards outside, and here comes a mob of 200 some men. And they stormed the jail, murdering Joseph Smith's brother first, and then Joseph Smith. Some people say he was trying to escape. Some people say that he was trying to protect John Taylor and Willard Richards from the mob, because he knew the mob was after him specifically, and he just lost his brother. I think Joseph Smith was a bigger man than people realize, because he didn't have to come back to Illinois to face trial. If he was some kind of con artist, he wasn't playing it very well. Not at all. You get your little friends, get however many wives want to go with you, and you head west. And you find you a little secluded place in a nice wooded area with a stream, plenty of game and nuts and berries. Nobody's going to bother you. That's not what happened. He came back to Illinois to face trial again. And if it's true or not, but I could imagine in his heart and his mind, said or not, he felt like a man who was coming as a lamb to the slaughter. Because a lot of times people can sense when things are going to go wrong in a most horrific way. And he had that sense. So again, the bandits stormed the Capitol on January 6th, where there was plenty of opportunity for the mayor of Washington, D.C. and the Speaker of the House, to implement what was being offered to them, which was the National Guard, to provide a barrier there to the Capitol. And yet they refused it. Why would you refuse? You it's like this. You already believe, as a Democrat, that Trump is dangerous. So dangerous that you are trying to impeach him on every time he farted, they were trying to impeach him on spreading nerve agent or something. I don't know. Whatever the chance they got, they were trying to impeach him. So to you, as the Speaker of the House, Pelosi, you seen him as a threat. And his MAGA army, you also seen as a threat. They're down the road from you, and you know they're going to throw a rally, a big party. And you don't prepare for that? Governor Ford, you know there's a lot of hatred for Joseph Smith. You knew that a sizable mob, could form to attack that jail. And you leave it with 2 guards? Insane. Not insane. It's what you wanted, both of you. Again, Joseph Smith was not going to win the presidency, but he had a large enough following in Illinois, it could have taken votes away from what we call the Democrats, who were for slavery, and force that vote and those electors towards what we call, I think it was called the whips, but what we would call now the Republican side. So again, Joseph Smith wasn't assassinated, murdered for being a polygamist. He was murdered because he was running for president, and it could have been detrimental for those who wanted slavery to stay intact. Right? You have Donald Trump, who's doing everything he can. Can you imagine being hit with 97 lawsuits or indictments or accusations that are going to court or whatever? And you got to fight all these things? And you're still in the race. You're still in the race after all that they can do to you. That says a lot about a man. Oh, he wants to become a dictator. Of what? A bunch of people that hate you? If he had the power to become a dictator, it would have happened while he was in office still. He could have called the army and said, hey, we're shutting it down. The election's over. I'm it. Ain't going to happen. Military still holds themselves allegiant first to the Constitution. and then to the president, which gives the power, the Constitution gives the power to the president to act. The president doesn't give the power to the Constitution to enable him to go as you please. So there's no way for Donald Trump to ever even think about being a dictator. Nobody's going to become a dictator of this country. It's already been said in the Book of Mormon that this country would never have a king. And I trust it. 2 hours. I've said a lot. I appreciate Piper and Bruce and Daniel and I think Fred was even in on it. Tim was here. Thank you very much, Tim. No Fred tonight. Oh my. Breaks my heart, Fred. Maybe you'll get a chance to watch it later. But you guys have a great night. And again, maybe on Friday. I talked to the pastor Neely, and I'm hoping that he'll join me on Friday night. I'll have to convince my friends that Saturday is the only day I'm going to be able to play volleyball if they want to play. So, again, for the love of God, pray often. Always pray. And pray for this United States, and pray for the soldiers that defend it, and all the first responders. They're being beaten down by the system that's supposed to be the one thing that they can rely on so that they can do their work with the most confidence, the utmost confidence. You guys have a great night. And thank you all forever. And I'm out.